nestled amidst sprawling fields, seemingly peaceful under the vast American sky. Its paint might be peeling, its porch a little creaky, but to the casual eye, it's just another relic of a bygone era. Yet what if, behind its weathered facade, within its silent, sagging walls, lay a secret so monstrous, so utterly depraved, it would forever stain the very fabric of American history? This isn't just a story about a house. It's a chilling descent into a nightmare, an exploration of how a seemingly ordinary place became a silent crucible of unspeakable horror, orchestrated by a mind twisted beyond all human recognition. Welcome to a forgotten chapter of American true crime, a cold case so profoundly chilling its echoes reverberate decades later, a stark reminder of the darkness that can take root in even the most tranquil landscapes. We're not talking about a simple crime here, nor a quick snatch and grab. This was a meticulously constructed psychological labyrinth, a private kingdom of terror built brick by sinister brick, where human lives were not just violently taken, but utterly extinguished, their very existence systematically erased from memory and official record. Our journey today takes us back to an era when rural America operated on an almost entirely different cadence. Communication was sparse, communities were insular, and the concept of stranger danger was often eclipsed by the familiarity of small-town life. This was a time when whispers could be easily dismissed as gossip, and disappearances tragically attributed to a transient lifestyle, or simply to a desire to leave one's past behind. At the heart of this horrifying tableau was a figure who walked among us, a neighbor, a seemingly ordinary man whose outward normalcy masked an abyss of unparalleled cruelty and control. How did he manage to construct such a dominion of dread right under the noses of unsuspecting communities? What societal blind spots, what vulnerabilities inherent in the trusting nature of that bygone era allowed his reign of terror to persist, virtually unchecked for so long? This isn't just a recounting of gruesome details. It's an unsettling, in-depth examination of the chilling depths of human depravity, and more importantly, the profound, unnerving realization of how close such darkness can dwell, often hidden in plain sight, behind a smile, behind a fence line. Prepare yourselves, because we are about to peel back the layers of time, venturing into the shadowed corners of a forgotten past, a past that continues to baffle investigators and haunt the collective memory. We will uncover not just the cold facts, but the palpable, suffocating atmosphere, the insidious psychological manipulation, and the enduring, unanswered questions that define this truly bizarre historical cold case. This is the story of a farmhouse that holds unspeakable secrets, and the calculating mastermind who ensured they remained buried for decades. Until now. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't hiding in the distant shadows, but are smiling innocently from across the very street. Stay with us as we unravel the terrifying truth of this profound American enigma.
Imagine a world where the promise of a fresh start, a new life, could become your gravestone. A time when trusting a kind smile meant walking into a meticulously laid trap. This is not a fable. This is early 20th century America, and the stage is set in a place that seemed, on the surface, like a slice of heaven: LaPorte, Indiana. Nestled amidst the fertile farmlands and shimmering lakes of northern Indiana, LaPorte in the early 1900s was the embodiment of the American dream. It was a town built on industry and agriculture, a community where prosperity seemed to hum in the air like a tireless threshing machine. Its streets, lined with sturdy oak trees, led to grand Victorian homes and bustling marketplaces. Children played freely in sun-drenched yards, their laughter echoing through quiet neighborhoods. Neighbors knew neighbors. Trust was the currency of community, and the loudest sounds were often the clang of the blacksmith or the distant whistle of a train carrying dreams and aspirations across the vast American landscape. It was a picture of idyllic simplicity, a testament to an era of burgeoning optimism and unwavering faith in the future. For many, it was the promised land, a tranquil haven far removed from the anxieties of rapidly industrializing cities. But beneath this veneer of pastoral perfection lay the subtle yet profound vulnerabilities of a bygone age. This was a time before widespread telecommunications, before instant background checks, before the internet wove its intricate web of information across the globe. Isolation, both geographic and informational, was a significant factor. People moved to new towns seeking anonymity, a fresh slate, or simply a piece of land to call their own. News traveled slowly, often by word of mouth or through local newspapers, if at all. A person disappearing might simply be assumed to have moved on, to have chased another dream further west, or perhaps to have settled quietly in some distant city. Families, scattered by the vastness of the continent and the demands of homesteading, might not hear from a relative for months or even years, making them tragically ripe for exploitation. There was an inherent trust, a societal naivete, that, while beautiful in its innocence and a pillar of community, left wide open doors for those with darker intentions. People placed unwavering faith in appearances, in a handshake, in the simple decency they expected from their fellow man. The concept of a predatory, systematic murderer preying on the lonely and hopeful was simply unthinkable in such a seemingly wholesome environment. And it was precisely this bedrock of trust, this quiet optimism for the future, that created the perfect hunting ground for a predator of unparalleled cunning, hidden in plain sight. It was into this seemingly impenetrable tranquility that Belle Gunness arrived, a woman whose very presence would shatter the peace of Laporte forever. She was not a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, a caricature of evil. On the contrary, she presented herself as something entirely relatable, entirely benign. A large, imposing woman of Norwegian descent, often described as stout and plain, with a face that could easily blend into any crowd. Belle meticulously cultivated an image of a hard-working widow, perhaps a little unlucky in love, but certainly industrious and seeking a new beginning. She purchased a substantial farm on McClung Road, just outside town, a sprawling property that seemed to promise growth and stability, reinforcing her image as a woman with roots and prospects. She was a woman seemingly seeking a husband, a partner to help her manage the farm and share a life, often expressing a desire for children and a complete family unit.
Her advertisements in Norwegian-language newspapers, placed far and wide across the Midwest, were carefully crafted lures, targeting lonely men, often immigrants with modest savings, who also yearned for companionship and a piece of land to call their own. These men, with their hard-earned money and their vivid dreams of finding a loyal wife and building a prosperous life, saw in Belle not a threat but a kindred spirit, a woman who understood their longing for domesticity and a stable future. Her demeanor was often described as quiet, even unassuming, yet there was a chillingly steely glint in her eyes, a calculated precision behind her every seemingly innocent move. She meticulously presented herself as a woman wronged by fate, a victim of circumstance, seeking only love and security. This elaborate facade, layered with perceived vulnerability and a potent promise of shared prosperity, was her most potent weapon. She understood the deep human yearning for connection, the desire for companionship and a place to belong, and she exploited it with a chilling mastery that would etch her name into the darkest annals of America's most bizarre and brutal cold cases. The stage was set, the curtain slowly rising on a horror story meticulously disguised as a utopian dream.
Imagine a life lived in quiet solitude, perhaps a man of advancing years, a widower, or simply a bachelor who has toiled away his best years, dreaming of a gentle hand to hold, a warm meal on a table set for two, a voice to banish the silence of an empty home. Picture him, thumbing through the classifieds of a local newspaper, not for work, not for property, but for companionship. He's looking for love, or at least a peaceful twilight to his days. And there it is, a small, unassuming ad buried amongst the notices for livestock and land, a beacon of hope in a sea of loneliness. Wealthy Norwegian-American widow seeks honest, dependable man for marriage, possess large farm in Indiana, offers companionship and a fresh start. A simple plea. Yet within its innocent lines lay a promise so utterly alluring, so perfectly tailored to the desires of the unsuspecting, that it became a death warrant. This was the dark artistry of Belle Gunness, the Midwest's most prolific serial killer. A woman who didn't hunt her victims with a knife in the dark, but with the insidious threads of false hope, spun into a web of unimaginable horror. Her prey was specific: lonely, often middle-aged or elderly bachelors, frequently immigrants like herself with a nest egg saved from years of arduous labor. These men were outside the common social circles, less likely to be missed immediately, and more inclined to believe in the fairy tale of a ready-made life with a seemingly respectable woman. They yearned for stability, for family, for the simple warmth of human connection that had eluded them. Belle understood this hunger. She didn't just target their money, she targeted their deepest vulnerabilities, their fundamental human need for belonging. Each advertisement, carefully placed in newspapers across the country, especially in Norwegian-language publications, was a psychological masterstroke.
It painted a picture of domestic bliss, of a comfortable life on a prosperous farm, presided over by a virtuous, if slightly forlorn, widow. Once an interested party responded, the game began. Belle, a cunning wordsmith, would embark on an extensive correspondence, weaving a tapestry of charm and deception. Her letters were crafted with meticulous care, each stroke of the pen a deliberate step deeper into the victim's trust. She would describe her life, her farm, her supposed financial security, always emphasizing her need for a good, strong man to share it with. She spoke of her piety, her desire for a Christian home, and her loneliness since her husband's passing. She would ask for photographs, painting an image of herself as a woman of substance, sometimes even suggesting she was younger or more attractive than her true, formidable self. More crucially, she would subtly, gradually introduce the topic of money, not as a demand, but as a practical necessity for their future together. She'd explain that she was having issues with tenants, or needed funds for a new barn, or wanted a demonstration of his commitment. She'd suggest he bring his life savings with him, or transfer them to her account upon his arrival, assuring him it was for their joint future, for the security of their new life. It was a test, she implied, of his earnestness, of his devotion. And so, one by one, they came. From bustling cities, quiet hamlets, and far-flung states, these hopeful suitors would embark on journeys across the vast American landscape, clutching their life savings and their dreams, all bound for the isolated farm in LaPorte, Indiana. The train ride itself must have been filled with anticipation, the rustle of their best suit,
the imagined scent of a home-cooked meal, the vision of a kind face awaiting them. They saw themselves not as desperate men, but as adventurers, embarking on the most important chapter of their lives. They arrived, often after dark, to the seemingly welcoming glow of the farmhouse lights, believing they were stepping into a new beginning. But the dream quickly soured. The farmhouse perhaps seemed a little too quiet. Belle herself, larger than life and less delicate than her letters suggested, might have initially charmed them with her hearty laugh and direct manner. Yet beneath the veneer of hospitality, a chilling efficiency was at work. These men, fresh off the train, were often disoriented, eager to please and utterly alone in a strange new place. They were isolated from their past lives, their families, their former acquaintances. No one knew exactly where they were or who they were with. The promised family was absent. The warmth of companionship was an illusion. The first few days, perhaps, were spent in polite conversation, touring the farm, discussing futures. Then the conversation would inevitably turn to the money, their savings, their deeds, their financial proof of commitment. Belle would insist on having control, on protecting their shared assets, on ensuring their future security. She would suggest they draw up wills, ensuring that if anything happened to them, their new wife would be provided for. A prudent suggestion to the unsuspecting, but for Belle, it was the final tightening of the noose. The air in the farmhouse, though outwardly calm, must have thickened with unspoken tension. For some, perhaps a fleeting moment of doubt flickered, a strange look in Belle's eyes, a chillingly precise question about their finances, the sudden, unsettling quietness of the farm after another suitor had supposedly left. They were caught, not just by Belle's physical strength, which was considerable, but by the psychological bonds she had carefully woven. They had invested their hopes, their dreams, their very identities into this new life, making it nearly impossible to turn back. And then, as swiftly and silently as a shadow, they vanished. No farewells, no forwarding addresses, just an abrupt cessation of existence. Their money, their possessions, their very identities, absorbed into Belle's expanding enterprise of death. The farm, once a beacon of hope, became a silent tomb, its secrets buried deep within the Indiana soil, echoing the cries of men who had simply yearned for a hand to hold, and instead found the cold grip of a murderer.
Spring of 1908. A deceptive tranquility cloaked the rural landscapes of LaPorte, Indiana. For years, the unassuming farmhouse of Belle Gunness had silently harbored unspeakable horrors. A sinister web spun by a woman who lured desperate souls to their doom. But even the darkest secrets eventually ignite. In the pre-dawn hours of April 28, 1908, the sky over LaPorte didn't greet the dawn. It glowed with the lurid, hungry light of a raging inferno. Belle Gunness's farmhouse, once a silent tomb, roared to life as a towering pyre. Flames licked greedily at the wooden beams, sending plumes of thick black smoke into the innocent morning air. Neighbors, jolted awake by the crackling fury and the frantic cries for help, rushed towards the horrifying spectacle, met by an immense searing heat that pushed them back, helpless witnesses to the building's consumption. This wasn't just a fire. It was the violent, fiery climax of a terror long hidden, a prelude to a revelation that would curdle the blood of a nation.
As the timbers groaned and collapsed, revealing only smoldering ash, a gut-wrenching discovery awaited. Amidst the ruins, rescuers unearthed 4 charred bodies, one believed to be Belle Gunness herself, alongside her 3 children. The initial narrative was one of profound tragedy, a family lost to a devastating accident. Local Sheriff Louis Schultz surveyed the devastation, his face grim as the community began to mourn. Yet even in the haze of destruction, a chilling discord began to sound. Dr. O.J. Austin, the local dentist, examining the supposed remains of Belle, delivered a stark, horrifying observation. The jawbone lacked the distinct dental work he had performed on her. This wasn't Belle. The realization sent a cold shiver through the investigators. Further scrutiny revealed the body was too small, too short, to be the imposing woman everyone knew. And then there was the critical absence. Belle's large, heavy trunk, known to contain her valuables and perhaps her darkest secrets, was nowhere to be found. It hadn't burned, it was simply gone. These unsettling discrepancies converged into a terrifying question. If that wasn't Belle, then where was she? And who, truly, were these other charred remains? The answer, horrifyingly, lay buried beneath the very soil Belle Gunness had walked upon. Driven by a grim intuition and the desperate, insistent urging of Ray Lemfier, a former farmhand with a bone-chilling tale of threats and disappearances, Sheriff Schultz ordered an excavation of the property. The stench alone was an omen, a sickly sweet decay that clung to the air even before the shovels broke ground. They began near the hog pen, an area known for its disturbed earth. The first macabre discovery was a sack, bulging with something suspiciously human-like. Then another, and another.
Each heave of the shovel brought forth a new layer of horror. Limbs, torsos, heads, dismembered, often wrapped in burlap or tucked into trunks, haphazardly buried. The initial shock of the fire gave way to the true horror. This wasn't an accident, it was a burial ground. As the gruesome harvest continued, victims began to be identified. Andrew Helgelien, a Norwegian bachelor who had vanished after visiting Belle with a substantial fortune. Ole B. Boodsberg. Countless others, many of them men who had answered Belle's insidious classified ads, seeking love or work, only to find a premature grave. The farmhouse, once an innocuous dwelling, was rapidly exposed as a meticulously crafted kill zone. The discovery unveiled not just bodies, but a chilling modus operandi. Each victim, lured by promises of marriage or employment, had arrived, often with their life savings. They were charmed, perhaps seduced, and then systematically, brutally murdered. Their bodies were dismembered with an almost surgical precision, dissolved in lye baths, and then buried in shallow, scattered graves across the property. In the hog pen, beneath the chicken coop, near the outhouse. The tools of her monstrous trade were unearthed: blood-stained axes, meat cleavers, sacks of lime, fragments of clothing. The sheer scale was almost incomprehensible, estimates quickly escalating from a handful to potentially 40 or more. Belle Gunness wasn't just a murderer, she was a prolific serial killer, turning her quiet farm into a mass grave, a monument to greed and unadulterated evil.
The revelation sent seismic shockwaves through LaPorte and across the nation. Newspapers screamed headlines of "The Hellhole Farm" and "The Butcher Belle." The image of the hard-working widow shattered, replaced by the terrifying visage of a black widow spider spinning a web of death around trusting, vulnerable men. Neighbors, recalling Belle's reclusiveness, her sudden influx of cash, the fleeting visits of new farmhands who disappeared as quickly as they arrived, now saw their dismissed suspicions solidify into a grim reality. A profound sense of betrayal and vulnerability swept through the community. How could such monstrous acts occur under their very noses? The victims, once anonymous names and classifieds, were now humanized, their tragic stories echoing from the fields where their final moments played out. And what of Belle herself? the central, chilling enigma. The prevailing theory, fueled by the dental discrepancies and the missing trunk, was that she had orchestrated her own disappearance, faking her death to evade justice. She likely killed an innocent woman, perhaps a housemaid or a vagrant, and placed her body in the fire, ensuring it was beyond immediate recognition, a final, cunning act of deception. Her motives, her true personality, remained shrouded in the smoke of the burning farmhouse and the secrets buried beneath. The audacious scope of her scheme, exploiting the societal vulnerabilities of her time, painted a chilling portrait of human darkness. The discovery of the dismembered remains in April 1908 marked the horrifying climax of Belle Gunness's reign of terror. It tore away the pastoral facade of rural America to expose an abyss of depravity. But it also left behind an enduring question, a haunting echo in the annals of true crime. Where did Belle Gunness go? Did she walk away, assuming a new identity to live out her days? Or did she meet her own violent end? Her ultimate fate, forever shrouded in mystery, ensures her story remains one of America's most bizarre and unsettling cold cases, a testament to the chilling possibility that sometimes the monster truly does get away.
A farmhouse, once an isolated beacon of a seemingly idyllic life, lay reduced to a smoldering ruin. But this was no ordinary tragedy. This was the prelude to one of America's most chilling and perplexing cold cases, a mystery that would strip bare the dark heart of human deception and leave an enduring stain on history. As dawn broke, piercing through the acrid smoke, neighbors and firefighters sifted through the charred remains of the Gunness farm. The devastation was complete, absolute. Initial reports spoke of a tragic accident, a family lost to the inferno. Then, the first horrifying discovery emerged from the ashes: the scorched, mutilated bodies of 3 children, identifiable as Belle Gunness's adopted daughter, Jenny Olson, and her 2 young sons, Myrtle and Lucy Sorensen. The sheer brutality of their demise was evident, even through the devastation, each child showing signs not of smoke inhalation, but of fatal blows to the head or strangulation. This was no accident. This was murder. The air, thick with the scent of burnt timber and unspeakable horror, grew heavy with dread. Sheriff Smutzer, a man accustomed to the grim realities of rural crime, found himself staring into an abyss. As they dug deeper, hoping against hope to find a survivor, another body was unearthed. This one, however, was different. It was the remains of an adult woman, but unlike the children, she was headless. Beside her, a set of dentures and a few pieces of jewelry. The community gasped. Was this Belle Gunness, the formidable, imposing mistress of the farm? Was this the final gruesome chapter of a family annihilated by fire and a monstrous hand? The immediate assumption was yes. The farm had burned, the children were dead, and here, amidst the wreckage, was what remained of Belle. But as investigators began the painstaking, grisly work of identification, unsettling discrepancies began to surface. The headless body, while roughly the right size for a woman, seemed to some who knew Belle slightly too short, too slender. Belle Gunness was a large woman, almost 6 feet tall, powerfully built. This body, however ravaged by the flames, seemed to defy that description. And the head? Where was it? Why would it be missing? Then came the dental records, or rather, the lack thereof. The dentures found with the body were meticulously compared to the dental work Belle was known to have had. They didn't match. Not precisely. The chilling possibility began to solidify in the minds of the investigators. What if this wasn't Belle at all? What if, among the ashes, lay not the victim of a fire, but the ultimate deception of a calculating killer? Was Belle Gunness, the woman who had captivated, charmed, and ultimately terrified those who knew her, truly dead? Or had she, with a cunning that bordered on genius, staged her own death to escape the reckoning for her monstrous deeds? The frantic investigation intensified.
turning from a tragic accident into a full-blown manhunt, albeit one with an invisible quarry. Every corner of the devastated farm was scrutinized, every piece of debris meticulously examined. The local community, initially mourning, was now gripped by a terrifying realization. The woman they knew as Belle Gunness, a pillar of the community, a recent widow, might in fact be a cold-blooded murderer, and worse, she might still be out there. The focus of the investigation quickly turned to Ray Lamphere, a farmhand who had worked for Belle and was known to be obsessed with her. Lamphere, unstable and prone to outbursts, was quickly apprehended. Under interrogation, he cracked, confessing to setting the fire, but he vehemently denied killing Belle or the children. His story, erratic and fueled by a strange mix of adoration and resentment for Belle, painted a picture of a woman far more sinister than anyone had imagined. He claimed Belle had drugged the children and murdered them before setting the fire, planning to vanish. He stated that the headless body wasn't Belle's, but a decoy, a ruse to throw off suspicion. He even suggested that she had used a pig carcass to substitute for her own remains, an idea that, while outlandish, resonated with the monstrous scale of her suspected crimes. Lamphere's confession, while providing some answers, only deepened the central mystery. If Lamphere was telling the truth, if the headless body wasn't Belle, then where was she? The tantalizing notion that she had orchestrated this elaborate escape, leaving a trail of bodies and a staged death, sent shivers down the spines of everyone involved. This wasn't just a murderer. This was a master manipulator, a ghost slipping through the fabric of society. The details of the headless body continued to haunt the investigation. It was identified as a local woman, a transient who had recently been seen on Belle's farm, perhaps lured there by the promise of work or marriage, only to become another victim in Belle's gruesome collection. The narrative of her methodical, predatory behavior began to take shape, piece by horrifying piece. This woman didn't just kill, she cultivated her victims, luring them with false promises of love and financial security, only to dispatch them for their wealth, or, simply, it seemed, for the sheer thrill of it.
She exploited the societal vulnerabilities of her time, the desperate loneliness of bachelors seeking wives through newspaper ads, the isolation of rural life, the trust placed in those who presented themselves as upstanding citizens. Men, often with savings, would arrive at her farm, dreaming of a new life, only to find themselves ensnared in a web of deceit that led them to an early, brutal grave. Belle, a seemingly unassuming farm woman, preyed on hope, turning it into despair, then dust. The question of Belle Gunness's fate became a national obsession. Newspapers across America carried sensational headlines, painting Belle as a black widow, a serial killer of unprecedented cruelty. The public devoured every grisly detail, fascinated and horrified by the audacity of a woman who could commit such atrocities and then, perhaps, simply vanish. Was she hiding in sight plain? Had she started a new life, assuming a new identity, far from the charred remains of her murder farm? The possibility was chilling, a testament to the fragile nature of identity and the ease with which a monster could disappear. Over the decades that followed, sporadic sightings of Belle Gunness were reported across the country, in Chicago, in California, even in faraway parts of the Midwest. Each sighting sparked a renewed flicker of hope that the mystery would finally be solved, that the cunning killer would be brought to justice. But each time, the trail went cold. The sightings were unsubstantiated, the leads fizzled out, and Belle Gunness remained elusive, a spectral figure haunting the annals of true crime. The enduring mystery of Belle's disappearance is precisely what gives this case its profound historical impact. It forced America to confront a new kind of criminal, one who defied conventional understanding, who operated under the cloak of respectability and who seemed to vanish into thin air. It cemented her legacy not just as a prolific serial killer, but as an enigma, a cautionary tale whispered through generations about the shadows that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives.
But the inferno that consumed the Gunness farm on that fateful April night didn't just devour a farmhouse. It ignited a firestorm of questions that continue to blaze, unanswered, more than a century later. Because while authorities quickly identified the remains of 3 children, the adult female body found amidst the ashes posed a far more insidious puzzle. Was it truly Belle Gunness? Or had the monstrous Lady Bluebeard pulled off one final audacious act of deception, vanishing into the annals of infamy? The official verdict was swift: Belle Gunness dead. Yet the evidence was, at best, circumstantial, at worst, deeply flawed. The body discovered was headless, making immediate identification impossible. Adding to the macabre mystery, the dentist, Dr. Keeley, claimed the teeth found in the wreckage belonged to Belle, a perfect match for her dental work. But here's where the narrative unravels. The missing teeth, a crucial piece of identification, became a source of immediate contention. Belle was known to have 2 gold crowns, front and center. The teeth retrieved from the fire, they reportedly had no such distinguishing features. Furthermore, Belle was a formidable woman, standing over 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighing over 200 pounds. The skeletal remains, however, suggested a woman significantly smaller. Was it simply the destructive power of the blaze, distorting bone and flesh beyond recognition? Or was it, as many began to whisper, a deliberate misidentification? This discrepancy fueled the most enduring theory. Belle Gunness didn't die in that fire. She orchestrated the blaze, perhaps even sacrificing an innocent, unsuspecting victim to fake her own death and escape justice. The motive was undeniable. Facing the consequences of her heinous crimes, her web of deceit tightening around her. Imagine the chilling calculation, the systematic slaughter, the financial gain, and then the ultimate disappearing act.
Some believed she simply faded into the vast American landscape, a phantom among millions. Others pointed to anecdotal sightings, a woman resembling Belle appearing in distant states, always just out of reach, a dark specter haunting the fringes of society. Could a woman of her cunning truly be extinguished by a mere house fire? Or did she, like a viper shedding its skin, simply slip away to strike again under a new identity? The idea that such a prolific killer could simply vanish, unpunished, is a chilling testament to the limitations of law enforcement in that nascent era of criminal investigation. Then there's the specter of accomplice involvement, a shadow that constantly dances around the edges of Belle's gruesome narrative. Could one woman, no matter how cunning, have carried out such an extensive campaign of murder and dismemberment alone? Her adopted daughter, Ginny, vanished months before the fire, her fate a grim precursor to the horrors to come. But the most prominent figure in this dark dance was Ray Lamphere, Belle's handyman. Lamphere was, by all accounts, deeply infatuated with Belle, a devotion she ruthlessly exploited. He was seen clearing away debris, digging holes, and always seemed to be at the periphery of Belle's sinister activities. He was eventually arrested and accused of arson in the farm fire. While awaiting trial, Lamphere reportedly confessed to fellow prisoners, not just to setting the fire, but to aiding Belle in burying victims and even to her ultimate escape. He claims she drugged a woman, placed her body in the house, and then set the fire, making it appear as if she had died. Lamphere insisted Belle had fled to Chicago or San Francisco. Was this the desperate fabrication of a man cornered, or a terrifying glimpse into the chilling truth? His confession muddies the waters further, painting a picture not just of a lone wolf, but of a predator with a willing, if misguided, accomplice. The lack of conclusive answers, the swirling vortex of theories, and the enduring mystery of Belle Gunness are not merely a testament to her criminal genius, but also a stark reflection of the limitations faced by law enforcement at the turn of the 20th century.
Imagine the scene: a burned-out farmhouse, bodies reduced to bone and ash, and investigators relying on rudimentary tools. Fingerprinting was in its infancy, barely understood, and certainly not universally applied as a definitive identification method. DNA analysis? A concept far beyond the wildest dreams of even the most visionary forensic scientists. Autopsies were crude, identification reliant on often unreliable witness testimony, dental records that were often incomplete or non-existent, and physical characteristics that could be easily obscured by fire or decomposition. Crime scene preservation was a foreign concept. Evidence was often contaminated, overlooked, or simply not recognized as such. The scientific rigor we associate with modern investigations was virtually absent. Instead, lawmen relied on intuition, interviews, and the sheer grit of shoe-leather detective work. In the case of Belle Gunness, this meant that the crucial evidence needed to definitively identify the adult remains, or to conclusively prove or disprove Lamphere's claims, simply wasn't available or properly handled. The very infrastructure of criminal justice was still evolving. This societal vulnerability, the inability to scientifically dissect a crime scene, to accurately identify victims or perpetrators, to link disparate pieces of information with forensic certainty, created the perfect vacuum for a monstrous individual like Belle Gunness to thrive, to vanish, and to become an enduring enigma. Her case is a stark reminder that in an era before scientific policing, the most cunning criminals often simply disappeared, leaving behind only whispers, theories, and a legacy of terror. The ashes of the Gunness farm still hold their secrets, protected not by Belle's cunning, but by the impenetrable fog of time and the limited scientific capabilities of a bygone era. And so the questions linger, forever woven into the fabric of America's darkest cold cases.
And so we arrive at the chilling silence that followed the inferno at the Gunness farm. A silence, however, that has never truly settled. For over a century, the name Belle Gunness has been whispered, debated, and dissected, refusing to fade into the dust of history. The question that haunts us is not just what happened, but how could it happen? How could a woman, seemingly ordinary, a pillar of her small community, orchestrate such a macabre ballet of betrayal, dismemberment, and death, leaving a trail of vanished souls and unearthed horrors so profound they defy easy comprehension? It's a story that claws at the edges of our understanding, forcing us to confront the unthinkable. Belle Gunness stands as a terrifying prototype in the annals of American true crime, a grim precursor to the infamous female serial killers who would later capture the public's horrified attention. Long before the sensational trials of the 20th century captured national headlines, Belle carved out her own gruesome niche, shattering every comfortable perception of what a lady was capable of. She wasn't merely a murderer driven by fleeting impulse. She was a serial predator on an industrial scale, a calculating architect of demise. Her methods, her staggering audacity, her sheer volume of victims, all were chillingly unprecedented for a female killer of her era. This wasn't merely a crime of passion or convenience, it was a sustained campaign of extermination, fueled by cold, methodical greed and an unfathomable absence of conscience, meticulously planned and executed. Her case brutally exposed the gaping vulnerabilities of a nascent justice system, a time when disappearances were harder to track amidst the burgeoning westward migration, when communication was primitive, and when the very notion of a black widow operating with such widespread impunity was almost beyond human comprehension. It forced a terrifying reevaluation. If she could do this, who else could be hiding such darkness beneath a placid veneer of respectability? It left an indelible scar on the collective psyche, a chilling template for the female psychopath that would resonate through every subsequent notorious case, forever altering how society viewed women and the potential for evil. The legend of Belle Gunness quickly transcended mere police reports and dry newspaper headlines, seeping into the very fabric of American folklore, an unsettling ghost story passed down through generations.
She became the archetypal Black Widow, a monstrous embodiment of feminine deception, luring unsuspecting, lonely men to their doom with promises of love, partnership, and a peaceful future, only to deliver them to a shallow, ignominious grave. The most persistent, the most tantalizing element of her mythos remains the chilling ambiguity surrounding her own ultimate fate. Did she truly perish in that horrifying farmhouse blaze, her reign of terror brought to a definitive end, or was it a final, masterful act of theatrical misdirection, a grand escape orchestrated to vanish into the anonymous sprawl of a rapidly growing nation? This unanswered question, this tantalizing what if hanging over her story, ensures her eternal, unsettling presence in our nightmares. The farm in LaPorte became a haunted ground, its very soil forever stained with the unspeakable secrets of the murdered, a place locals would whisper about in hushed tones. Children whispered tales of the Pig Lady, a macabre nickname born of the ghastly method of disposing of her victims' remains, a name that conjures images of depravity almost too grotesque to contemplate. Her story is not just a historical account, it's a profound cautionary tale woven intricately into the fabric of regional lore, a grim reminder passed down through generations, ensuring that the horrifying echoes of her atrocities resonate long after the literal flames have died down. Why then, despite the passage of over a century, does this particular nightmare continue to hold us so tightly in its grip? Why do the shadows of Belle Gunness still loom so large, commanding our attention? Perhaps it's the sheer audacity of her crimes, the almost unthinkable brazenness with which she operated, openly advertising for victims, luring them with false hope and the promise of a peaceful domestic life, then systematically dismantling their lives, their dreams, and ultimately their bodies. It's the profound psychological abyss she represents, an enigma of human cruelty. What truly drove her? Was it simply insatiable, all-consuming greed, a relentless desire for wealth unburdened by any flicker of empathy? Or was there a deeper, more sinister pathology at play? A narcissistic thirst for ultimate control over other human beings, a chilling, almost academic pleasure in the absolute power over life and death. We are inexorably drawn to understand the dark mechanics of such evil, to peer into that abyss and try, futilely, to comprehend how a human being could shed every last vestige of humanity. Her chilling ability to present a perfectly respectable, even matronly facade, to expertly lull her victims into a false sense of security, speaks volumes about the cunning and deeply deceptive nature of her evil. She weaponized universal human desires, the longing for companionship, for family, for a place in the world, transforming them into an elaborate, inescapable death trap. The horror, it must be emphasized, is not just in the staggering number of bodies eventually unearthed, but in the profound, crushing betrayal each murder represented. These were not enemies or rivals. These were men seeking a new beginning,
a partner, a home, a future.
They invested their trust, their hard-earned savings, and ultimately their very lives into the hands of a woman who saw them only as disposable assets, mere means to an end. The Laporte farm, with its carefully tended fields, its modest barns, and its seemingly ordinary farmhouse, was in reality a meticulously maintained charnel house hidden in plain sight. This chilling transformation of a quintessential domestic space into a clandestine graveyard is profoundly unsettling, a violation of the very concept of home and sanctuary. It's the chilling, almost unbearable realization that the greatest monsters don't always reside in the obvious shadows or lurk in dark, foreboding alleys. Sometimes they occupy the sunny farmhouse down the road, smiling sweetly, offering a warm meal and a cup of tea. The unearthed remains, the fragmented bones, the grim, unyielding evidence of dismemberment and systematic cruelty, these macabre details etch themselves into our minds, an unforgettable testament to a cold-blooded evil so absolute it truly beggars belief. The entire story forces us, unwillingly, to confront the darkest capabilities of our own species, prompting an uncomfortable, deeply unsettling introspection into the very nature of good and evil and the thin, fragile line that separates them. And this, perhaps, is the most terrifying, most enduring legacy of Belle Gunness, the chilling, indelible revelation that absolute darkness can, and often does, wear a veneer of perfect, unassuming normalcy. She was not a grotesque, cackling witch from a twisted fairy tale, nor a raving madwoman confined to an asylum. She was a mother, a landowner, a churchgoer, a seemingly respectable and even amiable member of her small, close-knit community. Her case rips away the comfortable, comforting illusion that evil is always identifiable, always marked by some external, obvious sign, a telltale grimace, a malevolent gleam in the eye. It forces us, collectively, to confront the unsettling truth that the monster might be the person next door, the one who appears utterly unremarkable, utterly trustworthy, utterly beyond suspicion. The Laporte nightmare serves as an eternal, unsettling whisper, a dark cautionary tale echoing through the decades. Appearances can be profoundly deceiving. The placid, undisturbed surface of everyday life can conceal unspeakable depths of depravity, a calculated cruelty that operates with chilling efficiency. It challenges us to look beyond the superficial, to question, to be vigilant, and to acknowledge the uncomfortable yet vital reality that the most profound horrors often spring from the most unexpected places, from within the very fabric of perceived normalcy. And in those haunting echoes we find ourselves pondering with a profound and lingering shiver just how well we truly know the quiet darkness that might lurk, even now, in the hearts of those around us, waiting for its moment to reveal itself.